The snow was thin that winter, like someone had forgotten to finish painting the season. It dusted the broken sidewalks and curled into the corners of rusted fences. In a small, graying town that had forgotten how to hope, a man walked alone. His coat was too large at the shoulders, and his hands stayed tucked in his pockets, not from the cold, but because they were too used to holding things that were no longer there. His name was Elias. He lived quietly above a second-hand bookstore. That rarely saw customers, and when it did, the visitors spoke softly, as if not to wake the stories sleeping inside. Every morning, Elias would unlock the iron gate, sweep the steps even if no one would come, and arrange the same 5 books. In the same old window like clockwork. A war memoir, a children's fairy tale, a cookbook with a page missing, a tattered love story, and a book no one could read, the letters rubbed smooth with time, *. People passed by without seeing him. He didn't mind. There had been a time, once, when he had a daughter, 6 years old, with tangled hair and a voice that filled every room like birdsong. But grief doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes it comes like rust, slow, silent. It settles into the corners of a man's life until he forgets what it felt like to shine. Elias still set a plate at the table some nights, still folded a tiny pink sweater that hadn't fit anyone in years. He didn't speak about her. He didn't need to. The way he stood in doorways too long or looked out at the schoolyard with that quiet, aching pause said more than words ever could. The world kept moving around him. The bakery next door changed hands. The train tracks that ran along the edge of town grew quiet. There was talk of a tech company setting up shop in the city center, but that felt like someone else's world. Elias stayed in his pages in silence, dust, and tea, and memories folded into every corner of his room. One evening, as the light began to fold into that amber hush before night, Elias stepped outside to lock up. That's when he saw her, She was crouched near the alley beside the bakery, fingers deep in a paper bag someone had tossed aside. Her coat was torn, hanging off one shoulder, and her shoes were mismatched. She couldn't have been more than 10, maybe 11. Her hair was braided in a way that said someone had once loved her enough to teach her how. Elias stood still. She didn't notice him at first. She was too busy sorting through cold bread, crusts, and half-eaten pastries with an efficiency that suggested this wasn't her first time. There was no shame in her movements, just hunger, and then she looked up. Their eyes met. Just a second. But in that second, Elias felt something shift, not in the world. In him, he should have looked away. Should have walked inside, pretended. He hadn't seen. But there was something in her gaze. Not just hunger, not just fear. There was calculation. And intelligence. A raw, watchful light that belonged to someone who had learned too much, too fast. She grabbed the bag and ran. Her steps were light, but her back was heavy, as if she carried more than just scraps. Elias watched her vanish into the falling dusk, her shadow swallowed by brick and fog. That night he didn't sleep. He made tea, sat by the window. The steam from his cup curled like old ghosts, and in his chest, something stirred that hadn't stirred in years. Not guilt, not duty, just a strange, quiet wondering, where does a girl like that go when the streets freeze? Who taught her to be so fast? The next day, he left a paper bag near the alley before sunrise. Inside, 2 sandwiches, a knitted scarf he hadn't touched since 2013, and a note he didn't sign? It was gone by noon. The day after, he added a book, a small one, with pictures of the stars and the word curious. Scribbled on the first page. That too vanished. Elias didn't speak of it to anyone. Didn't even let himself call it anything. But he began to watch the alley with a softness in his eyes. He didn't expect a thank you. Didn't hope for one. It was enough somehow to know that someone was taking what he left. Then one evening, 3 weeks after the first sandwich, she appeared again. This time. She didn't run. She stood near the alley entrance, holding the star book in one hand, scarf around her neck. Her shoes were still mismatched, but there was a steadiness in her stance now, like she was measuring something, Elias stayed still, not wanting to break the moment. She didn't speak. Just lifted the book slightly, then pointed to the page he'd scribbled on. Asterisk. I was curious, she said softly. So I read it. Asterisk, her voice was quiet. Not timid? Controlled? There was pride in it? And maybe, beneath that, a trace of loneliness? Asterisk. Elias opened his mouth, but no words came. The wind did the talking for them. It rustled the pages between them, as if the world was gently urging this moment forward. Asterisk. Finally, he asked, what did you think? Asterisk. She looked up at the stars, the real ones now, just beginning to blink awake above the rooftops. Asterisk. They're dying, she said. Every star in that book is probably already gone. We're just seeing the light that took a long time to get here. Elias blinked. The girl shrugged, like she hadn't meant to sound smart. Asterisk. But it's still beautiful, she added. Even if it's late. And then she turned, not to run, but to walk, back into the shadows. Elias stood in the cold long after she disappeared, the wind tugging gently at the edges of his coat. A name, he realized he didn't even know. Her name, but something deep in his bones whispered that he would, soon. Snow came late that winter, soft as breath on a mirror. It clung to the window panes of Elias's bookshop and blurred the edges of the world outside. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and cinnamon tea, and the silence was no longer heavy, only waiting. She came every few days now, never the same time. Never the same mood, sometimes quiet as a shadow, sometimes bold as brass. She would slip into the shop without a word, pluck a book off the lowest shelf, and curl into the armchair near the radiator as if she belonged to it. Asterisk. Elias never asked questions. He simply brewed 2 cups of tea, setting hers down beside her without a sound. She never thanked him, but she always drank it. Asterisk. He learned her rhythms. The way she tapped her fingers when thinking, the way her eyes scanned pages faster than he believed possible, and the way she always flinched at sudden noises, as if bracing for something she no longer trusted the world to prevent. Asterisk. One afternoon, after a snowfall that blanketed the entire street in quiet white, she looked up from a thick book on mechanical systems and asked, Do you know how to solder copper? Asterisk. Elias, caught off guard, blinked. I used to. Why? Asterisk. She hesitated, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled circuit board, battered and delicate, like something salvaged from a scrapyard war. Asterisk. I'm fixing it, she said. It's a logic controller for a learning module. The capacitor's blown and the traces are broken. But if I reroute power from this pin and ground it through here, she pointed, it should still run. Asterisk. Elias took the board in his hands. It was old, industrial, covered in dust and fingerprints. It shouldn't have worked. But he could see what she meant. Asterisk. You did all this? She nodded. He didn't ask where she got it, or how she learned. He simply said, I'll bring my tools tomorrow. That was how it began, not just tea and books anymore. Now there were tools on the table, wires, old monitors pulled from junk piles. She showed him how she could program an entire sequence using only a cracked tablet and logic charts she drew by hand. She built machines out of nothing, relays. From coat hangers, housings from cereal boxes, software stitched together like poetry. Asterisk. Elias didn't tell anyone. It wasn't his story to tell. Asterisk. But at night, he sat at the window and wondered what kind of world let a child like that go unnoticed. A child who could solve heat displacement with a pencil. A child who rewired broken calculators for fun. A child who never spoke of parents or school or yesterday. Asterisk. She didn't talk much. But when she did, it mattered. Asterisk. People think systems don't break, she said one night while coding a diagnostic loop on an ancient keyboard. But they do. They just break quiet, like a leak in the roof. You don't hear it until your feet are wet. Asterisk. Elias watched her fingers dance across the keys. And what do you do when the roof leaks? She didn't answer right away. Then, without looking up, she said, You build your own house. There was something in her voice that made him ache. She never used the word homeless. She never needed to. Asterisk. She talked in metaphors, machines, algorithms, code. But underneath, Elias could feel the quiet desperation of a girl who had been surviving too long on her own terms. Asterisk, he started leaving out warm clothes. A pair of boots near the door, a toothbrush by the sink in the back room. He didn't point them out. She never acknowledged them. But one by one, the items disappeared, absorbed into her world without question. They never discussed it, but one afternoon, when the snow fell thick and stubborn, Elias opened the backroom door to find her curled on the cot, sound asleep, a screwdriver still in her hand. He didn't wake her, just pulled the blanket gently over her shoulders and turned the light off, standing in the doorway a moment longer than needed. It was only then he realized she had started humming in her sleep, a tune with no words, soft, uncertain, but a melody. All the same. Days passed. Then weeks. And the girl, who had never told him her name, handed him a folded slip of paper one morning. He looked down. It read, "My name is June, 3 words. That was all, but Elias sat down after she left and held the paper like a sacred thing. June. He said it aloud once, quietly, like tasting the first sip of something warm after a long storm. That same week, the bookstore had an unexpected visitor, a tall man in a black coat, clean shoes, expensive watch, face too polished to belong on Elias's street. He walked through the door with the stiffness of someone not used to second-hand anything. Elias set down his cup. "Can I help you?" The man looked around the shop with mild interest, then held up a business card. "I'm from Neurotech," he said. "We're a technology firm expanding into this area. We're interested in community partnerships, youth initiatives, innovation grants, that sort of thing." Elias stared at the card but didn't take it. "I run a bookstore." The man smiled, thin and practiced. "Sure, but if you know any promising minds, young people with technical aptitude, vision, we're always looking to foster talent." Behind the bookshelf, June froze. Elias saw it. The way her shoulders tightened. The way her eyes narrowed. The man kept talking. "There's a regional competition coming up. Think tank model? The winner gets a mentorship with one of our senior developers. Maybe even a role." Elias finally took the card. "I'll let you know." When the man left, June stepped out slowly. Her voice was colder than the air outside. "I don't trust companies that want to help people they never bothered to see before." Elias didn't argue. He simply looked at her, then at the card, then back again. "They'll underestimate you," he said gently. She smirked, folding her arms. "Good." Then she turned back to her wires, her pages, her endless quiet. Construction, as if building a secret bridge across the space between what she had and what she deserved. Elias didn't know it then, but the system was already beginning to crack, and June, silent, brilliant, stubborn June, was already preparing to walk straight through the ruins. The snow turned to rain that week, soft, cold, relentless. It tapped on the windows of the bookshop like someone trying to remember a melody. Inside, the radiator hummed and June's machines blinked and whirred with life. Bits of code flickered across a second-hand monitor, while a paper schematic curled at the edges beside it, lines drawn in pencil, precise and quiet like the girl herself. She barely spoke that week. Not because she was angry, because she was focused. The flyer for the Neurotech competition lay folded beneath her elbow. She hadn't thrown it out. She hadn't said yes either. But Elias could see it in the way she moved. How her fingers danced faster now, how her eyes seemed to look through walls. She wasn't chasing a prize. She was preparing for something. Elias didn't push. He swept the floor, brewed tea, made soft remarks about thermodynamics and logic loops when she needed them. Mostly he watched and remembered. He remembered the way his daughter used to speak about the stars, not as wishes, but as equations. How her laugh had sounded like possibility. How he had promised her the world and then lost it all in one red-lit hospital room. But somehow, this girl, this strange, brilliant girl who arrived from shadows and silence, had lit something inside him again. Not in a loud, fireworks kind of way. In the way firelight fills a room after the power's gone out. Quiet, certain. One night, just after closing, He found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, a notebook open on her lap. Her hands were still. Her eyes tired. Asterisk. I don't think. I can do it, she said softly. Elias paused. He lowered himself into the armchair across from her. Careful not to speak too quickly. Asterisk. Why not? She looked up, and for the first time, her voice cracked. Because they'll see me. Asterisk. Not her face. Not her coat. Not her mind. Her. Asterisk. The girl who slept in alleys. Who rewired broken radios to keep her hands from shaking. Who had trained herself not to flinch when people asked questions with eyes that only judged. Asterisk. If they see me, she whispered, they'll know I don't belong there. Elias was quiet for a long time. The rain tapped gently at the window. A machine blinked softly in the corner. The whole shop seemed to hold its breath. Asterisk. Then he stood, crossed the room, and took something from the drawer behind the counter. Asterisk. A photograph. Asterisk. Worn edges. Two faces. A younger Elias with a smile that hadn't yet learned grief. And beside him, a girl. 6 years old, head tilted, eyes bright. This was my daughter, he said. June looked up slowly. Asterisk. She used to think she didn't belong either. In the chess club, in the science lab, in rooms full of boys who talked over her and teachers who gave her as but never really saw her. Asterisk. He handed June the photo. She held it with both hands gently, as if it might tear. Asterisk. But she did belong. And she changed people quietly, just by showing up, just by being brilliant and kind. June blinked hard. Elias knelt so they were eye level. Asterisk. If you walk into that room, he said, they won't know what's coming, but you will. You've already lived through more than most of them ever will. And you still built something out of nothing. He tapped the notebook on her lap. That's more than knowledge, that's power. June looked down at the photo again, and nodded. Asterisk. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. The next morning she asked him to tie her braid tighter. It was the first time she let someone touch her hair. Asterisk. The day of the competition came like a tide. Gray skies, wet pavement. A borrowed coat 2 sizes too big. June carried her notebook and a plastic case full of her project, a prototype optimization system that could self-correct power usage in failing networks. She'd built it using parts from toasters, calculators, and an old arcade console. Elias stood beside her outside the conference hall. You nervous? She shook her head. He smiled. Liar. She smirked, but her hands were trembling. You don't have to win, Elias said. You just have to be seen. Asterisk. She turned to him then for a long, searching moment. And in her eyes was something fragile, something enormous. I want to win, she whispered. He nodded. Then go. She walked through the glass doors, head held high, inside. The room was sleek and sterile, all chrome and cool lighting, with rows of booths and tech stations, teens in branded hoodies, laptops newer than the year June was born, judges with badges and tablets. Cameras in the corners. No one looked twice at her. Until she powered up her system. Asterisk. Her machine lit up in stages, blue, then green, then a soft golden pulse. It ran her sequence with perfect fluidity. Her diagrams, all hand-drawn, made seasoned engineers lean closer. She spoke clearly without flourish. She didn't sell her invention, she explained it, and something happened. Asterisk. Slowly. People stopped pretending not to notice her. Asterisk. A judge raised a hand. You're saying this could detect energy waste in real time and adapt the load? June nodded. With predictive corrections, yes, especially in decentralized grids, rural hospitals, remote towers. It uses minimal power to run, and the casing's heat-resistant. I built one that worked during the blackout last month. Asterisk. Another judge blinked. You ran this during the outage? Asterisk. Yes. Asterisk. Alone? She didn't answer that, but Elias saw it. The crack in the room, the beginning of respect. Asterisk. Then someone asked for her name. Full name. There was a pause. June looked toward the doors. Asterisk. Elias wasn't inside. But she knew he was there, waiting. Asterisk. She straightened her shoulders. Asterisk. June Layton. Asterisk. A name she had never spoken aloud in public. A name that belonged to a girl who used to belong nowhere. The judges noted it down. The next booth tried to follow, but the room wasn't listening anymore. Not really. June had already changed the temperature, and somewhere upstairs, a screen flashed red. System error, not the software. The structure, the assumptions, the neat little boxes they put people in, asterisk and June, fierce, brilliant, unregistered. June had just crashed it. Quietly, entirely, Elias stood outside in the rain, watching the clouds shift, not knowing exactly what happened inside, asterisk, but in his chest. Something whispered. She didn't run this time. She stood, asterisk. The snow had melted by morning, asterisk. The sky above the city was pale blue, rinsed clean by the storm. Puddles shimmered in the cracked pavement outside the bookstore, and the scent of thawed earth drifted through the door Elias left ajar. He sat in the same armchair, mug in hand, staring at the empty cushion across from him. June hadn't come back yet. The competition had ended the day before. He hadn't gone inside. He never asked how it went. All he had done was wait by the door and watch her walk in, and sometime later, watch her walk back out. Asterisk, she'd said nothing, just handed him the project notebook and smiled. Not a big smile, not triumphant, asterisk, a small one. Tired, quiet, but real. He hadn't seen her since. The bookstore creaked with its usual hush. A motor ticked faintly in the back room, one of June's prototypes still blinking its single green light. On the counter sat a folded paper bag, her favorite kind of sandwich, wrapped in the old wax paper from the bakery. He'd made one every morning since. Just in case. Then the bell rang. She walked in like she always had. No ceremony. Just a girl in worn boots and a hoodie with the sleeves pushed up, eyes too sharp for her age, holding something to her chest, a letter. Elias stood, asterisk, she handed it to him wordlessly, like a gift she didn't know how to wrap. Her hands were trembling. Just slightly, he opened it slowly. The envelope was cream-colored, embossed. Neurotech Foundation. Inside, the letter was brief. It congratulated Miss June Layton for winning first place in the Regional Innovation Challenge. It listed a scholarship, a mentorship, a seat in the summer accelerator, a stipend. A future asterisk, Elias. Read it twice, asterisk. He looked up, but June was already walking past him, setting her bag down like she had for months, curling into her usual spot on the armchair. She pulled her knees up, rested her chin there, and stared out the window. I don't know if I should go, she whispered. He said nothing. Just sat beside her, the letter still in his hands, asterisk. It's not just about them seeing me anymore, she said. It's about what I'll leave behind if I go. Elias looked around at the wires, the books, the walls filled with machines and folded notes and scrawled diagrams. At the girl who had filled the cracks in the store the same way sunlight filled a winter room, asterisk. What do you think you're leaving behind? He asked softly. June turned to him. You, asterisk, it was one word. Quiet, nearly swallowed by silence. But it landed between them with the weight of a truth neither had ever said out loud. Asterisk. Elias blinked hard, then smiled. Asterisk. You're not leaving me, he said. You're just walking further ahead. June watched him, uncertain. He leaned forward, voice a thread of warmth. Do you know the first time I felt like I could breathe again? Really breathe? She shook her head. The day you asked me if I knew how to solder copper. Asterisk, she let out the smallest laugh. That was a bad solder job. Asterisk, it was perfect, he said. Because it was yours. Asterisk, June didn't speak after that. Just rested her head on the armrest and let the silence wrap around them like a blanket. Asterisk for a long while. They sat there, the old man and the young girl, the broken and the brilliant, in the little bookshop that had become something like a home for both of them. Then she stood from her bag. She pulled out something wrapped in cloth, an object heavy with care. She unwrapped it gently and held it out to him. Asterisk, a device, small, handmade, tidy wires, polished wood casing. His name. Etched in tiny print on the side. Elias, asterisk. It's a memory keeper, she said. Sort of, it records things, fragments, pages, voice. I designed it for you. You talk and it stores the words, even when the power's out. He took it in his hands as if it might crumble. She shrugged, eyes wet but proud. Now, if I go, you can still talk to me or to her, to anyone you miss? Elias didn't trust himself to speak. He reached forward instead. And for the first time since he could remember, he pulled someone into a hug, asterisk, not a side hug. Not a one-armed pat. A real hug, and June let herself be held. For once, she didn't pull away, asterisk, when she left 2 weeks later, suitcase in hand, coat zipped up tight, nerves coiled beneath every breath. She turned at the gate to look back, asterisk, Elias. Stood on the steps of the bookstore, asterisk, he didn't wave. He didn't call out, he just nodded. Like a promise, she nodded back, then walked toward the future she had built from pieces, from cold bread and broken circuits and silent nights in borrowed rooms. She walked like someone who had always known the world could crash, and had chosen to stand in it anyway. Asterisk, that night, Elias sat in the bookstore, alone again, but the silence didn't feel empty. He reached for the small memory keeper and pressed the button, a soft chime. He cleared his throat, and then, slowly, he began to speak. Her name was June. The words echoed gently through the quiet, and somewhere far away, in a bright room filled with wires and whiteboards and strangers, learning her name for the first time, a girl smiled without knowing why. Asterisk, if this story touched you, subscribe. Or share where you're watching from. Asterisk, these stories matter.